Welcome to Beyond the Pages. I'm your host, Arlene Reyes from Donnelly.media. In this podcast, we go beyond the headlines, diving deep into the stories that matter with our team of journalists. Stay with us as we uncover the details, insights, and untold perspectives behind the news.
Donnelly.media presents Beyond the Pages. Captain Tree Service sponsors today's episode. When a disaster happens, call the captain. 856-796-3536.
Today at Beyond the Pages, we have with us Albert Countryman, who is a journalist and published author, former publisher and owner of Gloucester City News, and a current on-staff writer for Donnelly.media, newspapers of Sun Newspapers and Gloucester City News. We are lucky to have Albert as part of our staff writing team. Welcome, Albert. How are you?
Very good. How are you today, Arlene?
I'm good, thank you.
Yes.
So we're talking about a story that you wrote. It's actually two different parts of the story that you wrote for the Sun Newspapers. And it's about a mass burial site. How did you find out about this mass burial site at the Red Bank battlefield?
It was in 2022, and they did an archaeological dig. And on the last day of the dig, they found a bone from one of the Hessian soldiers, a femur bone. And the reason I heard it first on national and local news, first of all, because it was a big story to find this. What had happened, the battlefield is huge, the Battlefield Memorial Park, but there was a piece of land that was owned by these homeowners that they sold to the park in late 2021. So this was a new area. And it was sort of where the trench was built around the fort, and that's why they found the remains there. So I heard it basically on the news.
Okay, and then what did intrigue you to write further for the publications about
I've
the story?
always been interested in the Revolutionary War because, in fact, New Jersey has the most battles of any state in the Revolution. You have the Battle of Princeton, Battle of Monmouth, Battle of Gloucester, Haddonfield. So there was a lot of action here during the war. And then the fact that it was so close to home into the Sun newspapers, it made me fascinated. The one thing that was amazing is that the Jonas Cattell run, Jonas Cattell grew up in Deptford, in what is now Deptford Township. The Hessians had moved in, it was in 1777, they had moved into Haddonfield. The British just took over Philadelphia. It was before Valley Forge winter. And he sent the Hessian soldiers, which were German mercenaries, into Haddonfield in mid-October with the hopes of attacking Fort Mercer at Red Bank because it was an American fort. So anyway, on the 21st of October, he got done work and he was arrested for violating curfew of all things. So this is right in the center of Haddonfield. So I don't know what he was doing, but he had to stay in the Hessian jail overnight. He heard the Hessians talking about the attack on Fort Mercer the next morning. And, they didn't know, they were talking loud, I guess. So when he got up, he got released in the morning. He ran 10 miles all the way from Haddonfield to National Park, what's now National Park, to warn the American soldiers that the Hessians are coming.
Okay.
And then another part of this was that the Gloucester militia, which was based in Gloucester City, they took out a bridge from Brookline into Westville over the creek, and that prevented the Hessians from crossing there in a shorter, run so they had that diverted them. So between Cattell warning the soldiers at the fort and the bridge being out, they were ready. The guns at Fort Mercer at Red Bank, they were pointed at the Delaware River to prevent British ships from supplying the troops in Philadelphia because they had just taken over and they wanted their ships to bring troops and supplies and all that. But we had two forts, Fort Mifflin on the Pensy side and Fort Mercer. And what they had done, they have these large tree spears, like real long, and they put them in the moat of the fort and also in the river to block the ships from coming up. These are militias, like the Philadelphia Navy was the ones trying to block the ships with these big pegs. under the waterline, and there was like little militias in all the areas, the Gloucester Militia and all. So anyhow, am I talking?
No,
Okay,
go
all
ahead.
right.
No, this is
The
great
story
information.
of the
I didn't
battle.
realize
Yeah.
that one, that New Jersey had the most battlefields in the Revolutionary War. I was not aware of that. And, it's fascinating to know the history and the details of
what happened.
the history.
They were in the whole war, those two regiments. What they did, the colonel there, he had the guns that were pointed at the Delaware, he turned those cannons around and pointed them at where the Hessians were going to come because he had advanced notification. Right. Plus, in the moats, they had them long spear poles too. They attacked in the morning, and they had 2,000 troops. And at the end of the day, of the 400 American troops, there was 14 soldiers killed. There's a memorial at the battlefield from the regiment, and 23 wounded. Meanwhile, the Hessians, there was 82 soldiers killed and 228 wounded. So they were trying to get up the fort, and they were just, raining fire down on them. They also got a little help from the American ships on the Delaware. There was also, that was the Philadelphia Navy, they called it, who then trained their guns on where the Hessians were coming. So it was a decisive victory for the Americans, and it helped, and that was before Valley Forge, but it was a big battle, and that's the overview.
Okay, all right. Now, it seems like this took a lot of different organizations to make this discovery. Is this a continuous joint effort, or did they all come together for this specific effort?
Absolutely. Actually, there's a lot of organizations involved now once they found the remains. But the main person is Jen Janowski. She's the director of the Battlefield Park, and she's also a professor of history at Rowan University. And she runs that park. I mean, they have so many events down there, field days and reenactments, but they had archaeological digs in 2022 after they got that ground. And the guy she did with it was an archaeologist. His name is Wade Katz. They were on the last day of the dig. It was like 3 days. And they had archaeologists, but also Rowan University students who were like interns that were interested in history or archaeology. And the guy found a femur bone. He said, "I think I found a bone." And then from there, they did it over since then, and they found remains of 15 soldiers.
Okay.
But the organizations that are now involved are incredible. First, the Gloucester County Commissioners give a lot of support to the park. Of course, Jennifer and her staff do an amazing job, and the students at Rowan. But since then, with finding the remains and trying for the search for the DNA, they've been in touch with people at the University of Georgia, Utica University, Dartmouth College, Astrea Forensics in California, and also with historians in Germany. They're trying to find out the list, if they get lists of these two Hessian regiments of who were in it and who may have passed. And the DNA testing, which some of these groups are doing, teeth. But teeth, they can trace pretty far. And the hope someday is like they would identify some and then get in touch with their families in Germany.
Okay.
The fascinating thing, which you were going to ask, is about the New Jersey State Police. Their forensics is helping. They have organizations everywhere. But there was a sketch artist who drew a recreation of one of the soldiers who they had found the skull of. Like they found different pieces of different things, but the one they found an intact skull, pretty intact skull. And it's pretty accurate. They were paid soldiers from Germany. The effort continues to grow. Like Jennifer and Wade, they sort of coordinate everything. And it's a story that will continue as they find out the remains.
As far as the DNA results, do they have, or did they tell you any type of timeline that they're looking at for something like that?
Yeah,
right.
The best hope is from the teeth. So I imagine it's been a little while now. So, but I don't really know a time frame of how long any of that takes.
Okay.
But that could be a future story.
Right. Yes. Well, I was just going to ask, when would you expect to follow up on this story? The last piece. So there's 2 different articles that you've written about this.
Well, actually, there's a couple more that we've done that touched on it because also they have other events there. But yeah, this is actually my 3rd or 4th.
Okay.
No, I imagine for the next 5 years or so, this will be a good
Ongoing story.
Every few months or whatever, once a year, depending on what happens.
Right. Let's say you were writing the end of the story. How would you put that?
Oh, well, that would be great.
That would be your ideal scenario.
The end of the story would be, currently there's a memorial to the Rhode Island troops that lost their lives. But also, the Hessian troops are human beings, they're families. So to find some of the families and build some type of memorial for the Hessian soldiers, and then have the families come to the United States and have a big celebration.
Right.
That if they could identify some of that would be the great ending to the story.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I definitely. You had mentioned in one of the articles about the participation of African Americans and Native soldiers and their role in the battle.
Yes.
And many times I think that people may leave those type of details out. Why did you feel it important to mention?
It was important. It was part of the history of the war. In fact, the African Americans that fought were split between the British and the U.S. The British in the South offered them freedom if they fought for the British Army in the colonies. And the soldiers from Rhode Island, some of them were actually free African Americans, and some also were fighting for freedom. There was also Native Americans that fought on both sides, depending on who they thought would win.
Right.
So basically, I thought it was important because sometimes, we don't encompass the whole history of, we think just George Washington and all, but it was a lot of people that fought on both sides.
Now, you mentioned what some of the Native American soldiers were offered in exchange for fighting for whichever side. Was there something done similar to that for the Native Americans?
Well, yeah, they wanted to keep their land, first of all, and more of the tribes actually thought the British would treat things better and give them more freedom than the Americans would,
Right.
But there was a few tribes that fought with the Americans, mostly up like New York and that area. So, I think generally the tribal chiefs believed that they would be treated better under the British. They weren't, there wasn't as much fighting between Native Americans and the United States then. It was like early in our history.
Right. What other parts of either of the articles, any of the articles that you wrote based on this battle, would you like to shine a little light on?
I think a little more light, like on the Haddonfield aspect of it, in the sense, where was the Hessian, where were they staying in Haddonfield in their little jail, and how this Jonas Cattell, he was a fascinating. They have a family cemetery down in Deptford and all, but how he came about to be there that day and to hear it,
Right.
And then they were key towns then, because basically you had at that time the main towns were Philadelphia, Gloucester City, Haddonfield, and places along the river like National Park where Fort Mercer is, the Battle of Red Bank. So that would be very interesting. What was Haddonfield like then? How many stores were there? Was Kings Highway ran through it?
Right.
What was National Park like then? The Whittle House, it's a museum. That house was there during the battle.
Okay.
It's not, it's real close to the fort, maybe 400 yards away. It's a museum now. But Ann Whittle, who lived there with her husband, that was their farm, the Whittle farm. Then the battle happened, and she set her home up as a hospital. she was angry at both of them for violence. She didn't like violence at all.
Right.
So she took in, the injured from both sides. So they have they just had candlelight tours this weekend of the Whittle Mansion.
Oh, okay.
So this is also the battlefield, but then they have the park and everything, and that's real popular. And then part of some of the field days and reenactments at the Whittle House, they have women dressed in colonial clothing cooking how they used to cook in the day, and it's well kept up and all. So it's really fascinating.
Do you know offhand what their hours are, or when can people see the reenactments?
On the Battle
on
of
their
Red
website?
Bank, Battlefield website. But just type Battlefield Battle. They're generally open a lot. They're the museum has certain hours, but people are welcome to come to the battlefield. Whenever and they have you can walk along the Delaware River. Plus, there's on the other side stuff for kids to do. They have a lot for children. Even children participate in some of the digs, and to learn how to do it. So it's really a family atmosphere. They had a thing called the Butterfly Festival to celebrate butterflies, and more than 1,000 people were there. So it's quite a nice sight.
Right. And then Haddonfield normally does reenactments through different times for different history things, because I'm not sure if everybody realizes how much history is in Haddonfield. Do you know anything about those?
Yeah,
or?
They had the Haddonfield skirmish. I think the Haddonfield Sun highlights, but they every year they reenact. There was minor skirmishes. There was the Indian King Tavern, I believe, that from colonial times, where sometimes when the British controlled it, they stayed. But oftentimes, I think the state legislator met there, the colonial state legislator for New Jersey. So it was a very important town, Haddonfield. Yeah. But it is one of the more fascinating stories I've covered, throughout.
In recent times. Yeah.
I did want to say something for the Sun newspapers.
Okay.
Yeah. We concentrate on local news, local. And there's stories that we write. For example, in the Palmyra Sun last week, I wrote about the new trash collection schedule. Now, that don't sound like too much fun, but the town recently got rid of their outside contractor and had taken control of picking up the trash in town with borough employees.
Okay.
And there's a new schedule. So, people are used to taking their trash out on Tuesday. All they got to do it Wednesday. But that's the local news that the Sun newspaper that affects people's lives. But then there's also bigger stories like the Battle of Red Bank or things like that. But that's one of the things you would get through the Sun newspapers.
Right. Is that very hyper local news that, yes, not only affects your daily life, but also gives insight onto the past of where you live and also the future, because there are times where all of you are writing about things that are coming to town or different types of, I know you all attend boarding plans and all of those type of things. And, to find journalists and publications that still do that is very rare now.
But we do a good job.
Yes, you all do a good job, and we appreciate having you all on staff and bringing this to readers on a weekly basis. That's a wrap for this episode of Beyond the Pages. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, keep reading between the lines.